The rain lashed against the imposing stone facade of Blackwood Manor like a barrage of accusations. For over a century, the sprawling Gothic estate had loomed over the town of Oakhaven, a monument to old money and older secrets. Clara Vance stood at the edge of the wrought iron gates, her trench coat pulled tight against the biting chill. As an investigative journalist and true crime podcaster, Clara had built a career dragging skeletons out of closets, but Blackwood Manor felt different. It didn't just harbor secrets, it felt alive, breathing malice into the cold autumn air. 3 construction workers had died on the grounds in the past month. The official police reports cited tragic accidents, a fatal fall, a collapsed scaffolding, a sudden heart attack, but the gruesome details whispered by the townsfolk suggested something far more sinister. Clara adjusted her audio recorder and stepped onto the grounds, determined to find the truth. Waiting for her on the wraparound porch was Detective Elias Thorne. He was a man who looked exactly like the town he protected, weathered, cynical, and tired. When Clara first reached out to him, Elias had dismissed her as a sensationalist seeking clicks. But as she approached him now, seeing the dark circles under his eyes and the defensive cross of his arms, she saw a man carrying a heavy burden. Their initial conversation was sharp, filled with the friction of 2 fiercely independent people used to working alone. Yet, beneath their sparring, a quiet, undeniable current of attraction pulled at them. Elias saw the sharp, empathetic intelligence in Clara's eyes, while Clara sensed the protective, unyielding core beneath Elias' gruff exterior. Reluctantly, he agreed to let her accompany him inside, warning her that the house had a way of getting into people's heads. The interior of the manor was a cavernous echo chamber of peeling wallpaper and shrouded furniture. The air was thick, carrying the metallic, unmistakable scent of old copper and rot. As Elias led her through the labyrinthine halls, explaining the circumstances of the workers' deaths, Clara felt an oppressive weight settling on her chest. The victims hadn't just died. They had died with expressions of profound terror and strangely twisted ecstasy. It was in the manor's sprawling, unlit basement that the true horror began to unfurl. While Elias examined a cracked foundation wall where the last victim had been found, Clara ran her fingers along a section of brickwork that looked subtly newer than the rest. The moment her skin touched the cold stone, the basement vanished. Clara was plunged into a visceral, suffocating vision of the past. The damp air of the cellar was suddenly replaced by the intoxicating scent of jasmine and sweat. She saw a young woman, Isabella. She was a maid of breathtaking beauty, her dark hair wildly framing a face flushed with forbidden passion. Beside her was a younger Julian Blackwood, the current heir to the estate. The vision was suffocatingly intimate, a raw display of desperate, consuming lust as the 2 lovers entangled in the shadows of the basement, hiding their illicit affair from the world. But the warmth of their passion was violently shattered by the heavy, booming footsteps of Silas Blackwood, Julian's tyrannical father. Clara watched in paralyzed horror as Silas discovered them. His eyes burned with puritanical rage, disgusted that his bloodline was mingling with the help. When Isabella, trembling but defiant, confessed she was carrying Julian's child, Silas's rage boiled over into monstrous violence. He seized a heavy iron fireplace poker. Clara felt the phantom spray of blood on her face as Silas brought the iron down on Isabella. Julian, paralyzed by a lifetime of cowardly submission, did nothing. He shrank into the shadows, weeping as his father brutally beat the life out of the woman he claimed to love. As Isabella lay dying on the dirt floor, her final, blood-choked breath was a promise of eternal vengeance. Silas, barking orders at his sobbing son, forced Julian to help him drag her broken body to the alcove and brick her into the foundation. Clara gasped, snapping back to the present, collapsing into Elias' arms. The detective held her tight as she shuddered, the reality of what she had seen, what the house was hiding crashing over her. She knew then that the deaths weren't accidents. Isabella's spirit, warped by decades of agony, betrayal, and unadulterated rage, had awakened. She was no longer a tragic victim. She was a demonic force of vengeance, targeting the men who dared enter her tomb, using illusions of their deepest, darkest lusts to lure them to their brutal ends. The haunting escalated with terrifying speed. That evening, Julian Blackwood, now a hollow, aging man, returned to the manor with his elderly, wheelchair-bound father, Silas, and his own teenage daughter, Lily. They had come to oversee the halting of the renovations, unaware of the hellfire waiting for them. Isabella's spirit wasted no time. She bypassed the men and struck at the heart of Julian's world. She possessed Lily. The transformation was horrifying. The sweet, innocent girl began speaking in a voice like crushed glass, taunting her grandfather with secrets only the dead should know. She crawled along the ceiling, her limbs cracking and contorting, vomiting black, vile fluid while laughing with Isabella's seductive, mocking cadence. The house itself seemed to turn against them. Doors locked themselves, the temperature plummeted to freezing, and the lights shattered. Trapped in the manor, Clara and Elias fought to protect the family. In the chaotic darkness of the manor's library, hiding from the stalking, possessed girl, Elias pulled Clara close. The adrenaline, the fear, and the profound trust they had built culminated in a desperate, deeply passionate kiss. It was a moment of pure, grounding romance, a stark contrast to the toxic, destructive lust that had doomed Isabella and Julian. Their connection became their anchor. Realizing that bullets and logic could not fight a demon, Elias used a police radio to call in a desperate favor from Father Thomas, an unorthodox priest who had helped Elias on a deeply classified case years ago. Father Thomas arrived just as the storm outside reached a fever pitch. He was a stern man who carried the scars of spiritual warfare. Together, Clara, Elias, and the priest managed to subdue the thrashing, inhumanly strong Lily, tying her to the heavy oak bed in the master suite. The exorcism began, an agonizing battle of wills that stretched through the endless night. Isabella fought back with terrifying psychic assaults. She projected illusions of Elias' past failures, trying to break his mind, and manifested visions of Clara dying, trying to shatter his heart. But Clara's voice, steady and loving, cut through the demonic noise, keeping Elias grounded. As Father Thomas chanted the holy rites, throwing holy water that burned the possessed girl's skin like acid, he realized the demon's grip was rooted in unacknowledged sin. Isabella would not leave until the truth was spoken. Father Thomas commanded Elias to drag Julian and Silas into the room. Bound by the priest's holy commands, the demon, speaking through Lily's bleeding lips, recounted every grisly, agonizing detail of her murder. She forced Julian to look at the monster he had allowed his father to be. Under the crushing weight of his guilt, the terror of losing his daughter, and the commanding presence of the exorcism, Julian finally broke. Weeping uncontrollably, he screamed out his confession, admitting to the affair, the pregnancy, and his complicity in Isabella's murder, while Clara's podcast recorder captured every damning word. But Isabella's vengeance demanded blood. With a final, ear-splitting shriek that shattered the massive bedroom window, the demonic force unleashed a gale of wind into the room. A massive, jagged shard of glass flew through the air like a guillotine blade, sinking deep into the throat of the elderly Silas. The old tyrant choked on his own blood, his eyes wide in terror, before slumping dead in his wheelchair. The man who started the curse had finally paid the ultimate price. With Silas dead and Julian's confession recorded, the heavy, suffocating aura of the manor instantly vanished. The storm broke, giving way to the gentle, golden light of dawn filtering through the broken window. Lily went limp, taking her first real breath in days, the darkness completely purged from her eyes. Isabella's spirit, her story finally heard and her murderers brought to justice, had found her peace. Months later, the town of Oakhaven was transformed. The state had seized Blackwood Manor, tearing the cursed stone down to its foundations to create a public park bathed in sunlight. Julian Blackwood was serving a life sentence, his cowardly silence finally broken. Lily, healed and free from the toxic legacy of her bloodline, was packing her bags for college, looking forward to a bright future. Clara's podcast series on the true story of Isabella shattered download records globally, ensuring the wronged maid would never be forgotten again. On a crisp, bright autumn morning, Clara and Elias stood by his packed truck. The shadows of the manor were gone, replaced by the warmth of their shared survival. Elias reached out, taking Clara's hand, a genuine smile breaking across his worn face. Together, they climbed into the truck and drove out of Oakhaven, leaving the ghosts behind, driving toward a future anchored in truth and in each other.